what we're going to start with is just really looking at what kinds of things affect achievement. So we know that a certain amount of base intelligence is part of the equation, right? You've got some students with developmental disabilities that there's some aspects of that that are going to influence where they are starting and their range. We also know that teacher and school quality really matter. This previous experience is really important. We know that, what kids have had an opportunity to experience beforehand is going to affect where they are when they enter your class. We know that there's a lot of structural factors that can influence student achievement as well, like poverty or a lot of trauma. But what we have come to learn in the last couple decades is that there are these other factors, these student mindsets, and their beliefs about learning and school can really have a huge impact. So that's what we're going to be focusing on for the next 2 days, is what's going on that is shaping these students' mindsets and beliefs. So certain beliefs can make learning feel safe, safe and exciting, or they can feel threatening and scary. And these two beliefs really lead students to have very different conclusions about the meaning of the events that are happening for them every day. And the meaning that they're making of these experiences, the narrative that they are constructing, really determines the behaviors that they end up choosing to engage in. So if a student is coming in with a narrative that is telling them that school is not a safe place, then even the best teaching is going to have a really hard time reaching them. So it's like the old saying goes, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So we're going to be talking about these three mindsets, growth mindset, value, purpose, and belonging. And we're going to start today with growth mindset. So as many of you probably are familiar, how many people here have heard of Carol Dweck? Most of you. So Carol Dweck is really the pioneer of this work around growth and fixed mindset. So she was really interested in understanding what is it that makes some students be able to respond with resilience to a setback or a challenge. Some kids really are invigorated by this, and other kids just are really disheartened by it and give up and seem to just have a really hard time responding. So what she found is that there's really two different mindsets that students hold about intelligence that have a big impact on the way that they engage with learning. So some students believe that intelligence is fixed, that you're born with a certain amount of it and that's all you get. It's kind of like eye color. It's just there. You can't change it unless you go and get colored contact lenses. But other students had this belief that intelligence is more like a muscle and it grows with effort. So effort and trying hard and learning new strategies is what's going to help you to become more intelligent. So what she found is that these different beliefs have really important consequences for the kinds of goals that students have, how they view effort, and their reactions to failure. So students with a fixed mindset, their goal in school is to look smart. And it kind of makes sense if you think about the fact that they're coming in with this idea that it's like eye color, you either have it or you don't, and you're in this situation where you're being evaluated for how smart you are, then their goal is going to be to show you that they have that thing. So it makes them much less likely to ask questions in class. It makes them much more afraid to show that they don't know something because they're afraid that that will confirm for you that they don't have that intelligence. Whereas students with a growth mindset, their goal in class is really to learn. So they're more likely to ask questions. They're more likely to seek out new strategies and let you know that they don't know something. So the way that we have come to discover these mindsets is by asking kids whether they agree or disagree with these statements. So students with a fixed mindset, their goal is to look smart, and so they were more likely to agree with statements like, the main thing I want when I do my schoolwork is to show how good at it I am. Whereas students with a growth mindset, their goal is to learn, so they're more likely to agree with statements like, it's much more important for me to learn things in my classes than it is to get the best grade. Sure. Right. I think that's a great question. And we're going to look a little more about those kinds of things, how the environment can send cues that tell students whether they should have the goal of learning or the goal of performance? So that's a great question, and it's also true that we all have a variety of mindsets. So we're going to talk about that as well, and what kinds of things we can do to sort of investigate our own mindsets. So students with a fixed mindset, this is really interesting piece and part about the fixed versus growth mindset, is that students with a fixed mindset are much more likely to see effort as an indictment of low ability. So they really see this having to try hard as evidence that they don't have that innate ability. If you're good at something, you should just be naturally good at it, and you shouldn't have to try hard. This is particularly true of students who've been given this label of gifted. This can really come for them that they have had a very easy time in one domain, and so they think that that means that's how it is. You should always have an easy time of it, and if you have to try hard, that means you shouldn't even bother. So students with a growth mindset, on the other hand, they see effort as how you increase your ability and you increase your intelligence. And so students with a fixed mindset were more likely to agree with the statement, to tell you the truth, when I work hard at school, it makes me feel like I'm not very smart. Whereas students with a growth mindset are more likely to agree with statements like, the harder you work at something, the better you'll be at it. Reactions to failure. Not surprisingly, students with a fixed mindset tend to give up when they encounter a setback or a failure, because they see it as evidence that they didn't have that innate ability, so why try harder? Students with the growth mindset, on the other hand, are more likely to work harder when they experience a setback. So here's some statements that students with a fixed mindset are more likely to respond to, positively, saying they agree with it. To tell you the truth, they were asked if they failed an exam, how would they respond if they were doing poorly in a class. I would spend less time on the subject from now on. I would try not to take the subject ever again, and I would try to cheat on the next exam. I think this last statement is really telling. For me, it gives me a lot of compassion for kids that feel like they don't have any other choice, that they don't see it as something where they could get better if they just had some new strategies or try hard. So students with a fixed growth mindset have a more resilient response, so they are more likely to agree with statements like, I would work harder at this class from now on, I would spend more time studying for the next test. So these students, obviously, over time are going to show very different trajectory for their academic achievement, right? The students who are giving up after failing an exam are obviously not going to do better over time. So why is this? Why are these students experiencing these very different trajectories? We kind of already said, right? Like they experience a setback and they give up. But what happens is they experience this, then a growth mindset student will increase their effort after a failure, leads to higher achievement. And then what it sets in place is this recursive process where it reinforces their belief that they actually can impact their academic trajectory. They can impact their outcomes. Whereas students with a fixed mindset are having the opposite trajectory. So they experience a failure of some kind, they reduce their effort, and that leads to lower achievement, which then reinforces this idea that they don't have that fixed ability. So over time, they just do worse. But what we know is that it's really possible to change students' mindsets. And this is where we have really founded our work, is looking at, this study looked at students' mindsets before the program. They were taught, after they were entering 7th grade, and then they were taught this idea that your brain is like a muscle. They were taught the neuroscience behind it, and then over time, the students who were taught that, they started doing better. So this is very exciting, but as we said when we first started this talk, really there was not a lot of research out there that was taking this out into a large-scale application of this kinds of programs. So there had only been the largest study prior to PERTS in 2010 forming, was there'd only been a study with up to 200 students. And the researchers were heavily involved, so they were there in the classrooms. They were making sure that the fidelity of the implementation was really kept up. And it's very costly to do that kind of work, so it's not going to be possible to really take that out into schools everywhere. And this is a great quote from Anthony Breich, who is the president of the Carnegie Foundation for Teaching and Learning, The history of education innovation is replete with stories that show that innovation works in the hands of a few, but loses its effectiveness in the hands of the many. So that is really the goal of PERTS, is that we wanted to make sure that we can create scalable ways of getting this work out into the world. And so one of the ways that we started with doing this is by doing these online interventions. So taking these, what had been done in this small scale with the researchers going into classrooms and teaching this work, we wanted to see, is it possible to do this using the internet? So in this study, we had over 1,500 students in high school, and we had a really good balanced mix of students who were in all ranges of socioeconomic status. Racial breakdown was really great. We had 13 high schools in different parts of the country. And what we did was design 2 online intervention modules, and students were taught about the brain and how it works, and neuroplasticity, and how learning really takes place and changes the shape of the brain. And so we discussed the implications of this for effort and for help-seeking strategies and for what it means about this idea, this label of intelligence. And just to give you a picture of what the program looked like, so we were using source credibility. We were saying, you know, this is scientists giving you this information. This is to show the neural, how we're explaining neural plasticity. And then we also use source credibility in the form of peers talking about their beliefs about this. So this, this example was actually written by a student. And so I just want to play it for you. We also had the whole program was
Last week in class, I learned a valuable lesson. I learned that with a little self-discipline and a growth mindset, I can achieve heights I honestly didn't think were in my reach. I owe it all to Mr. Trimmer. He told us stories of people doing incredible things, like getting fit from exercise and passing a previously failed class. At first I thought it was all a waste of time, and that some people were just born smart, that they just have it in their genes. Mr. Trimmer made us use growth mindsets for the week, and he told us to look for a change. Reluctantly, I did so. That week, I didn't miss any homework, a struggle for me. I was amazed. Could he have been right? Since then, I've only improved.
So I just love this student's quote, and I have actually spoken to Mr. Trimmer, and he's an awesome teacher too. So then what we did after having students go through learning about the science and hearing from other students, then we ask them, help us explain these ideas to other students. So a really important component of these programs that we design is that they are not presented to students as intended to help them. We ask them to help us with our research to help other students. And the reason that we do that is because if you feel like you're being targeted for help, it can make you feel defensive, right? Because you think that they must think that I need help. So that's a really important piece of how we frame this for students. And so we ask students to write about it, and what that does is it helps them to internalize the message for themselves, so they're creating part of the intervention for themselves. And they are also, we're asking them to think about how they would talk to a friend who is struggling or who had experienced a bad grade on an exam. And so by writing about it in that context, they're rehearsing the message that they'll then say to themselves when they experience a setback. So these are aspects of persuasion research that have been kind of woven into this. And what we found is that students who were in the growth mindset condition were more likely to pass classes that they were struggling in. So we were looking at underperforming high school students, students who had received a grade of 2.0, their GPA was 2.0 or lower in the semester previous to the intervention. And we're particularly interested in this group because we want to see those students succeed, of course, but they're also the students who, as you saw from the Chile data, are more likely to have these limiting ideas about their abilities. And we also saw a significant increase in these students' GPA. So how can we change mindsets through our daily interactions? I'm going to hand it over to Carissa now, who's going to take over for the second half of this talk.
Jackie just talked about one way that we can change students' mindsets. We can change their mindsets by explaining to them that the brain is malleable and that when you learn new things, your brain forms new connections, and that's what makes your brain stronger and smarter. But a really important question for educators who are spending a lot of time in the classroom with their students is how can we change their mindsets through our daily interactions? So what can we actually do all the time with students to be reinforcing these mindsets? So one really important thing is to think about the language that we use. What messages are we sending to students? So what beliefs are being reinforced? What goals are being promoted? And are mistakes being valued? So I want to talk about two particular ways of talking to students. One has to do with praise, and the other one has to do with how we talk about mistakes. So I'm going to start with praise. So I don't know how many of you remember the self-esteem movement. I grew up in the 90s, so I certainly remember it. When I was in school, I got a trophy for everything. Everyone got a trophy for everything. I didn't get a trophy for everything because I was good at everything. It was just the way things were. I remember I was on the volleyball team, and our team wasn't very good, and I especially wasn't very good. But at the end of the year, when there was the award ceremony, not only did my team get a trophy, but I even got a trophy, and I was really surprised by that. And I think, obviously, the intention of the self-esteem movement was really well-meaning. People thought that if you praise students for being smart, for being good at things, that would make them feel good about themselves, and then they would become better at those things. But Carol Dweck and Claudia Mueller thought that this type of praise that was meant to build students' confidence might actually be inadvertently undermining their confidence by causing them to react more negatively in the face of failure. So how does that happen? So in one study, they wanted to test this out to see if it's really true that these different kinds of praise lead students to respond differently in the face of a challenge. So what they did was they brought fifth graders into the lab, and they gave them a moderately difficult set of problems to work on. So how many of you are familiar with the Raven's Advanced Progressive Matrices? This is an example of what that looks like. So this is supposedly a culture-free IQ test. So they used problems from this IQ test in this study. And so what you do is you fill in the missing piece. So just for fun, let's try this out. Does anyone know what the answer is here? Exactly. So you can put the top row over the middle row to get the bottom row, or the left column over the middle column to get the right column. So they gave all students a moderately difficult set of these problems. And then they gave all students positive feedback. So it's kind of hard to tell how you do on these types of problems. You're not really sure if you got the right answer. So the researchers took advantage of that and just told everyone that they got the same score, that they did really well. But the way that they gave them praise was slightly different for three different groups of students. In one group, the control group, they were just told, wow, that's a really good score, and that's it. But in the other two groups, they were given an explanation for why they did well. In the intelligence praise group, in addition to being told, wow, that's a really good score, they were also told, you must be smart at this. So this is the kind of praise that a lot of students were receiving in the 90s during the self-esteem movement. And then the third group of students, they were given effort praise. So in addition to being told, wow, that's a really good score, they were also told, you must have tried really hard. And then they gave all the students the experience of encountering a setback. So they gave all the students a very difficult set of IQ problems. Okay, so this is not this is more difficult than what the students actually completed. This is just to demonstrate that they were very difficult, but I think it's fun to try to solve this problem because it is very challenging. So does anyone want to give it a shot? Yes, of course. Most people don't get this. I gave this talk, like my second year of graduate school, to a room full of Stanford professors, and no one got it. So don't feel bad. Just take a guess. Yeah. Well, if you have an idea, just call it out, and people can call out other ideas. 5? That's right. How'd you get that? Yeah, that's right. So you can treat the loops as, yeah, good job. That's excellent. That's great. So you can kind of think of the loops as positive and negative numbers, and you can also do it the other way, from the top row to the middle row. So you can do, 3 3 plus 2 is 5, and over here, 3 minus 1 is 2. And that's how you get it. So the problems that the students did weren't this difficult, but I think this is a really fun one to try out. So then, after all the students completed this much more difficult set of problems, the researchers told all the students that they didn't do a good job. They were given the score, and the researchers said, that's a lot worse. So then, after they received this negative feedback that they did really poorly on this set of problems, they went back again to completing a moderately difficult set of problems. And what the researchers were interested in is how students' performance would change on two equally difficult set of problems after they experienced this setback. So they were comparing their performance on this first set of problems with their performance on this final set of problems. And what you would expect, this is an IQ test, problems from an IQ test, so you would expect that students would do the same. Or maybe they would do a little bit better on the last set because they had a chance to practice these problems. And that's what you see in the control group. The students in the control group did just as well on the third trial as they did on the first trial. But students who were given effort praise actually did better on the third trial compared to the first trial. But what I think is most surprising, given that students were practicing these problems, is that students who were given intelligence praise actually did worse. So by this final set of problems, students who were given effort praise did significantly better than students who were given intelligence praise. And then after the study was over, the researchers asked each student, so they were doing this one-on-one with a researcher, and the researcher asked the student to write about their experience in this study for the next student that was coming in, so the student would know what to expect. And there was a little line for them to write what their score was. And what they found is that even though their names weren't attached to these sheets of paper, the students who were given intelligence praise were significantly more likely to lie, and only in one direction. So just to kind of summarize what we can take from this study on praise, what you want to focus on when you're praising students is effort and strategies, helping students understand that their actions lead to success. So saying things like, I like how you tried a new way to solve that. You've been practicing and I can see it's paying off. You don't want to focus on qualities that can be interpreted as innate, like talent or intelligence. Because what happens is when you praise students for doing well, when they succeed, when they encounter a setback later, they think if my past success made me smart, my current struggle makes me dumb. And I think that's what was happening in the study that we just discussed. But the students who were given the effort praise, when they encountered that struggle, it's likely that what they were thinking was, well, if when I did well, it was because I was putting in a lot of effort, maybe I just need to try a little bit harder. So process praise is, of course, a little more rich than just telling students that they tried really hard. And I'll show you some examples later of more rich types of process praise. What you really want to do is you want to highlight for students the particular actions that they take to achieve their success. So I think that's an important point to note. It's not just about telling every student that they tried hard. And that's especially important because a lot of times you don't know if a student tried hard. So if you tell a student, oh, you did a great job on this paper, you must have tried really hard, and they didn't try hard, that could actually reinforce a fixed mindset. They'll think, well, I didn't try very hard, I must just be really smart. So instead, a good thing to say might be, I really like your opening lead, it really hooked me, specific things that they did so they can understand how the process they took in doing their work led to their success. So the second thing, and something that I've been especially excited about lately, is the way that we talk about mistakes with students. I think it's really interesting that a lot of students are really afraid to make mistakes in the classroom. I remember being a student, and I remember thinking that mistakes were the worst thing that could happen in the classroom, which is kind of surprising if the classroom is about learning. You should be actually making a lot of mistakes and learning from those mistakes. So how do you help students change the way that they think about mistakes and embrace them in the classroom? So first, you want to create the norm that you love and want mistakes. And of course, you don't want to just say, I love mistakes, mistakes are great. You want to explain why mistakes are good. So what happens when students make a mistake, and not an error, like putting a positive sign instead of a negative sign, but a conceptual mistake is their brains are actually more active. A spark happens in their brain when students make a mistake, and then another spark occurs when they correct that mistake. So it's the process of engaging with something really difficult, having to think really hard, and then making this conceptual advance that really helps students grow. And that's something that you want students to be doing. And if you explain to them that it's actually changing their brain and helping them grow, that can help students believe that you really do love and want mistakes and that they're useful. And finally, you just want to give challenging work that encourages students to make mistakes. If students are just doing something a little bit harder every day and they're not really being pushed, then it's going to be hard to get them to believe that mistakes are valuable because they're not going to see evidence of that. They're not going to see that they engaged with something really challenging, struggled a lot along the way, and really learned. So you want to give the students the experience of doing that a lot. So we'll talk more in detail about some of these practices later when we do the classroom practices section, but I just wanted to give you a preview of what the research shows is useful to do in the classroom. And I also want to point you to a set of resources. We're working on something called the Mindset Kit so that we can share the research about why mindsets are important, how to help students develop them, and then give them ideas to do in the classroom, so activities, lesson plans, etc. And there are kind of two core components of this new mindset kit. One is a section that's curated by us, so it's organized into courses. So there's a growth mindset course for teachers, there's a growth mindset course for parents, and we're coming up with a course, Jackie's actually leading the development of this, for learning teams. And that will include, presentations like this so that you can help other people learn about the research, showing that mindsets are important. And it will include activities to do in those professional learning groups. And another piece is this community for educators to share and discuss their own ideas and practices. And we think this is really important because a lot of teachers are often doing this work in isolation. They're kind of a lone wolf in their school. And they really want other teachers to bounce ideas off of, and they want to know what other teachers are doing. So that's the point of this practice library that we've created. So I encourage you to check it out, and so that you can kind of go a little bit deeper into these things after the 2 days that we have with you. Okay, so now I want to show some concrete examples of what do these practices actually look like in the classroom. So I'm going to start by showing the favorite no video. And so what we're seeing here is an example of how mistakes are celebrated and publicly introspected.
Hi, my name is Leah Alcala. I teach 8th grade math, and this is my warm-up routine that I do with my students almost every day. I call it my favorite no. Good morning, you guys. Your warm-up is on the board. I'm going to hand out your index. I put a warm-up problem on the board, hand out index cards to all the kids, have them write their answer. I collect it, and then I sort it. And I say yes, no. And I look for my favorite wrong answer, or my favorite no, and we analyze that. I need to teach you before the test. The test is too late. And this is a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. We're going to see your mistakes, you're going to see my mistakes. But a mistake is your opportunity to share with me how much you understand. And if I don't know that you don't know something, I need to teach you before the test. The test is too late. And this is a great spot for me to teach you. Make sure your name is on your card, put your pencil in your pencil slot, and pass your cards to the center. I started my warm-up routine to replace clickers that a lot of classes are buying. So that was a clicker for each student. You ask a question, they lock in an answer. And then you look at your computer screen and you know what percentage of your students understand the problem. Well, we didn't have the money for that, so instead, okay, here we go. I thought, well, what if I gave everyone index cards, collected them real quick with their answers already written on it, and then I can just sort them as quick as possible and find out what percentage of my kids know the answer. No? Yes? Costs 40 cents instead of $15,000. Yes, so we have quite a few yeses and some very interesting no's. 1, 2, 3. I then took that a step further, something I couldn't do with clickers. Look at the ones who are getting it wrong. How far are they from getting it right? And showing that work to the other kids. Okay, my favorite no. Someone wrote this. I say it's my favorite no because I want the kids to first of all recognize what they're about to see is wrong. And I want them to recognize that there's something good in the problem. Like there's a mistake, but it's my favorite no because it showed some good math. So that's the wrong answer. But they did something. They are like, oh, I did do that right. We always talk about what's right first. So what in that problem am I happy?
And the -2.
Right first, so that if it's any student's work, they are like, oh, I did do that right. There's a mistake, but the mistake didn't ruin the whole thing. What do I like about this problem? Gavin?
Well, they distributed both with the 4x and the -2.
Very nice. And what? Today's lesson was on factoring, so I needed to make sure they understood how to distribute. They distributed, and what lets you know that they distributed? David?
How there are no more parentheses.
There are no more parentheses, and they didn't just drop the parentheses. So they're asked to distribute a term with a variable. They're asked to distribute twice. They're asked to distribute a term with a negative sign, which is often a very common mistake that kids make. And my students do not. Like, I have 3 years of CST data now to show that one mistake my students do not make is distributing a negative, which is amazing because they used to all the time. Distributing -2 to -6 is +12. And that was one mistake I was absolutely looking for and I did not see, which made me very happy. Not until the very end, as we've gone over different sections of the problem that are right, that I will then ask, okay, now what is incorrect? What does this person not understand? Where's the mistake? If I get a third of my class raising their hand, ready to tell me the mistake, it's pretty high engagement at that point. Yeah?
4x times 2x is 8x squared.
Very nice. This 4x times 2x multiplies to 8x squared. Can someone convince me of that? How do we know that 4x times 2x is 8x squared? My low-level students are very engaged. They feel like they're not getting penalized for being wrong. They're not being made fun of. I'm not looking at them. No, there's no peer pressure at this point. But they're like, wow, that's my mistake. And now I understand. It's very comforting. I mean, I feel very with my kids at all times. I'm not surprised by what they don't know. They're not surprised by what they don't know. It's how it should be. It creates more of a dialogue with me and them.
Great. So I love that video. I think it's nice because it's something that anyone could do tomorrow. It's a nice way to start getting students comfortable with making mistakes. So the next video that I want to show is in that feedback bucket, the one that I kept talking about process praise. And so this is actually a video that we're working on with the teaching channel, and it's still being edited. So you guys are getting a sneak preview of what's going to be up on the teaching channel soon and up on the Mindset Kit soon. And then after we watch these samples, you guys will get an idea to brainstorm your own ideas.
I want you to jot down on your Post-it your next little for yourself.
Having a growth mindset means that you believe that your intelligence is malleable.
It's time for writers.
Writers Workshop. A Writers Workshop model helps promote growth mindset because it gives students an opportunity to really focus on the process and the habits of mind of what it means to be a writer.
Giving ourselves little goals or directions help us grow as writers.
Make them move and talk.
You want to make your characters move and talk so your reader can really picture them? Awesome goal. Go get started on that.
One thing I really focus on in my classroom is praising the process rather than praising the product.
That's such an important goal. You want your reader to really be able to read it, so you're going to make sure you have really clear spaces between your words. Super important. Go get started.
So rather than saying, this product was really good, it breaks down for students what they did that helped them to accomplish that goal.
You really make your characters come to life. You said, like, I'm lost.
And it helps them to think about how they can continue to grow and emphasize those strategies in their work.
I wanted to teach you how to write a lead that kind of hooks the reader.
I also think that process praise helps build a growth mindset because it starts to become the language that students then use.
You also have already thought of a problem.
So if I'm praising their process, then they can start to focus on the different things that they're doing well in their work, and they then can begin to internalize that language and also use that in supporting partners.
My goal was to move and make my characters talk and make them in the video.
Thanks for listening to your partner. So show us where you did that in your writing. Your goal was to make your characters talk. Can you show us a place where you did that in your writing? Whoa, you really made them come to life. Way to set a goal in your writing.
You have set some great goals for yourself about what you're going to do next to take charge of your writing. Writers, I'm going to give you 20 minutes to work on reaching these goals. If you reach this goal, set another little goal for yourself.
How did you start?
Austin told his mother thanks.
That lead really hooked me because you told me not only what your character was doing, where your character was going, but also what your characters were saying. They said,
Writers, you are really taking charge of your writing. I saw Alexandra. She wanted to revise the beginning of her story. So she went over to the writing center and she said, I'm going to go revise the beginning. She got a revision flag. Sarah really wants to work on making a strong ending. So she set the goal using her folder that she is going to write an ending for her story to solve the problem. Writers all around the classroom, you're setting little goals and then reaching those goals. I try to make my process praise really authentic through really spending time looking at students' work. So before I have gone into a conference with a student, I really spent time looking through students' work so I can kind of pinpoint what are those areas that I really want to celebrate with that student.
I took your book home last night and I started reading it, and you have done something really amazing. Can I tell you what you did that was super amazing?
in the beginning, you really made me picture where your story is happening and what was happening. Awesome work, writer. So I was thinking, something you might start trying as a writer is writing in your piece about how your characters are feeling. Do you think you might like to try that out?
Whoa, writers, check this out. Look over here. Joshua discovered in his folder he has a realistic fiction writing checklist, and he used it to see, have I done all the things that realistic fiction writers do? Wow, you could try that too if you're feeling like, what's my next goal?
I think if you really want to build your practice in terms of giving process praise, one of the best things that you can do is start to kind of script out what you want to be saying. So have a little cheat sheet for yourself that you can carry around with you in a binder on a clipboard.
I can't wait to see you try that in your writing. Keep up the great work.
I heard writers whispering directions to themselves like, imagine another character. Think of an adventure. Make sure my reader can read it.
I first introduced process praise to my students through a lot of modeling, so my own self-talk was something that I think was really helpful when I was working through things in front of students.
Awesome job putting your goal up there to celebrate that you met that goal.
I also think that we create a lot of really clear visuals for students about what our goals are, and then we can refer back to those in our process praise. And so I think it just kind of becomes like the fabric of everything that we're doing in our classroom.
Where did you reach that goal?
I elaborated on 3 pages.
You elaborated on 3 pages today. Would you hold it up to show us how you met that goal?
Wow.
I'm seeing some quiet me too. Some other friends also elaborated in their writing today.
I think that teaching students about growth mindset in the classroom really helps them to take ownership over their own learning, to be willing to take on challenges, to reflect on their mistakes, and that can carry beyond the classroom into their lives when they are no longer with me.
Okay, so I really love that video. I think the Mueller and Dweck study with 5th graders that I presented earlier is a really great demonstration study showing how person praise can actually be very harmful. But I think this is really nice because it shows how to actually give specific, authentic process praise in the classroom. So I want to break right now because I know that we've been sitting for a while, and I know people are starting to go to the bathroom. So we'll come back and we'll start doing some activities and more discussion after the break. So thank you.